Well, folks, welcome to Matrix Uploaded again. It's really an amazing section we're doing is graphs and functions. And grade 10s, we're going to just quickly revise or you'll probably come to this in the later in this year, is the guy called an exponential function. Okay, we've looked at parabolas and we've looked at hyperbolas and we're looking at exponentials, but don't panic with this. Your teachers will definitely go through this. But grade 11s and 12s, you know this, so you need to be listening. But grade 10s join in as well. We're going to sketch a graph of 2 to the x. Now there's an exponent there. That's different to 2 divided by x, or even x squared, or 2x. And then there's one with a fraction there, a half. And then we're going to take that graph and drop it by 1, and we're going to take this graph, gx, and we're going to raise it by 1. Now let's start off and see what we get. Okay, here's our first two graphs. Okay, now I'm going to pick, and this is the values that I normally choose with your exponential. Go -1, 0, and 1 with them. With the hyperbola, we of course did it differently. Now if you look at this, let's see. 2 to the x, well, what is that? How do we deal with that? Well, let's see. Okay, if we look at that, I'm going to write that in quickly. Okay, well, this is 2 to the -1, 2 to the 0, and 2 to the 1. So that is 2, that is 1, and that is a half. 2 to the -1 half. So we've got these coordinates. We've got -1, a half we can plot. We've got 0 and 1, and 1 and 2. With a half x, this is a little bit meaner because you've got a half to the -1. Now you can use a calculator, but all you have to do is work it out as 2. You might have a half to the 0, anything to the 0 is 1, and a half to the 1 is of course a half. So if we look at these points, now hold on to them. We've got -1, a half, 0, 1, 1, 2, or you could have, if you look at this, these other ones, this is for the graph of 2x. But if you've got a half x, this guy, these points would be, now remember, you go with that, the x and the y. The x and the y and the x and the half. So we're going to plot these two different graphs using those things. So let's see what happens. Okay, well, if we do that, what do we know? There's our first graph. This one, we plot the points, we get the graph of 2x, -1, a half, remember that? Let's go back and check those quickly. Look at this, -1, a half, -1, a half, 0, 1, 1, 2, -1, a half, 0, 1, 1, 2. And that's the graph of that. Now that gives us, notice there's an asymptote here as well. In other words, this guy is the line y equals 0. It's the x-axis that's an asymptote in this thing. The graph will never cut there. Okay, and it forms this increasing shape. Okay, now let's have a look. If we look at the other one, -1, 2, that was the one with a half x. It goes down, it decreases, and it approaches that x-axis. It has one asymptote. The exponential graph has one asymptote, and that's the x-axis in this case. All right, now, what do we do if we move these up and down? Okay, let's start off with our graph here. Okay, we're taking our x values again. We've taken the little basic graph, and we've already worked out the y values. Now, when you drop it by 1, you're subtracting 1. That is so important. Okay, so you're subtracting 1 from the y values. You drop, these are the y values. The y drop by 1. Okay, so how does that work? Let's see. Okay, so if we drop it by 1, a half -1 is minus a half, 1 - 1 is 0, and 2 - 1 is going to be 1. Now, if we sketch them, and remember, guys, it's important that you use those. So you've got -1 minus a half. And then you've got 0 and 0, and 1, 1. Okay, great. So let's do that. So let's plot those points. And it drops down, the graph of that drops down, -1, minus a half, 0, 0, 1, 1, and you get an asymptote, y equals -1. So the graph of y equals 2x drops down, you see, and gives it. And that's important to note because this is the original graph, and you dropped it down by 1 to give you this guy as 2x minus 1. Okay, and you've got your points, and you can then work it out, and you must show the asymptote as well. Okay, this is very important. Good revision for you, grade 11s and 12s. Okay, let's look at the half one. We've got our points, which we did. We worked out a half x as those values. Now, what are we going to do? If we add 1, okay, if you add 1, in other words, you're adding 1. Why are we adding 1 to these guys? It's because of that. These are in other words, like the hyperbola, the y values, you add 1. Remember, we're not doing anything to the x yet. Okay, so we're adding just, so in other words, the x's stay the same. So this is 3, 2, and 1.5. So you've got minus 1, 3, 0, 2, 1, and 1.5. Let's plot them and see. Okay, so let's just see. That's 3, 2, and 1.5. Okay, so if we look at this, it jumps up 1, minus 1, 3, 0, 2, and 1, 1.5. In other words, the basic graph shot up, and you have those things, okay? And you put in your little asymptote, y equals 1 as well. So that whole, this 2x, this half x graph jumps up 1 if you do that. Okay, what a pleasure. Good, well guys, don't go away. Stay with us on Matrics Uploaded. Let's look at some more juicy exponential functions coming up.